Hi, this is Kayla, and it is week 3, and I'm going to answer the questions this week for group 4. And the first question that we were asked is, according to White in the Camacho text, what is the nature of environmental injustice as related to food? So in our reading, we heard about the radioactive hazards that are contained in our food, and a lot of what we talked about in this reading was the fact that this contamination is particularly affecting the poor and the minorities. And our reading provides a few different reasons for that. They talk about the fact that the poor and the minorities might not be aware of the fact that this contamination is happening. We read about some incidents in South Carolina and Pennsylvania, and the author calls these amongst the worst ever documented, but they were kept secret for over 20 years. So going back to, they might not know that it's even happening. They might be eating this contaminated food, but not know that they're going to be affected by it. And also they talk about how sometimes even if they are aware of it, they just don't have the means to overcome that. They're forced to live with it because of their lower class. And I think the important thing to take from what we read is that our author says that despite the different reasons that are given as to why this is happening, it doesn't really matter why it's happening, that we acknowledge it is happening, and so we should focus not necessarily on discovering what the cause of it is. We know that it's happening, so let's take responsibility for that and make sure that something happens. Nobody, despite their class or their race or any other reason, should have to live with eating contaminated foods that could essentially cause them health risks. So moving on to our second question, it is, what does Bachman mean when he writes of the objectification of humans and the environment? And in Bachman's reading, he is talking about how we kind of assign meanings to different terms. When we hear humans, we hear nature, we hear any term, we assign a meaning to it. And I think what he's saying is that the meaning that we assign, sometimes it can be completely incorrect. He talks about how these meanings, we seem to have separated the definition of human and environment. We no longer see a connection between these two terms. We don't see ourselves as a part of nature, and we don't see nature as a part of us. And I think he's talking about how that can really be a problem because we're starting to focus on production and domination and outside factors rather than focusing on the fact that we are all kind of part of one world. And so I think he's trying to bring us back to the realization that nature and humans can coexist and should coexist, and that when we objectify them the way that we do, we lose the meaning of the two terms and the fact that they can coincide. I found a quote from that reading to be really interesting. Bachman says, civilization has rarely considered the good of humanity, much less that of nature. And I think that's a really good point. Not only have we completely separated the two terms, but we've lost respect for both terms. So I think this reading kind of reminds us to bring the two terms back together, kind of symbolize, and look at the world as a whole. So that's what I took out of those two questions, and I look forward to watching the moderator videos this week.